let's take it back. Let's talk about early James Harden before the rumored fat suits, before the strip clubs became a thing, before the quitting became a thing. Let's talk about OKC James Harden and his role as a sixth man on that team. So what were your early impressions of the guy, and what did you think of him as a player way back when?
So this may shock you, but I kind of always hated James Harden. I didn't like him on
Okay, wow.
OKC. I I
All
I,
right.
I don't know. There was just something about him that I just never liked. You can ask my buddies. I once called him a glorified OJ Mayo. Not a great take, but that's what I called him early on. Uh, I always thought he was a little bit of a I don't know. There's something about his style of play. Even early on, you could kind of see he was this like he was just fishing a little bit even early on. Yeah, he was a great
Fishing
player.
for the foul calls and stuff.
For the foul calls, exactly. Yeah, like I always like I don't know. There's just too much herky jerkiness in his game that I didn't like initially. He's always had that. Like he just kind of like stop and go, stop and go. Never was a fan of that kind of thing. But I mean, I was wrong early on. I was definitely wrong early on. I was a little too early with that take. He played well in OKC. He was getting to the basket. He was finishing at the rim. He was basically complementing Russ and KD pretty well. So, and people were calling him, Manu Ginóbili, right? People were like,
I was going
"Oh,
to bring that up. Yeah.
he." People were comparing him to Manu at that point. So he had a pretty strong start in his career. But me personally didn't like him. But I will admit I was definitely wrong about him early on in his career.
Yeah, I think you've swayed too far in the other direction.
I did.
So,
I did.
what did you think of the Manu comparisons? Did you think that was on point?
I did not. I did not think they was on point. I think it was a little too early for the Manu comparisons. I think really where the comparisons were, I think they were both left-handed guards who
Yeah,
were six men. So that was like why people were throwing out the Manu comparisons.
it felt a little lazy. I'll say that
Lazy,
because
exactly. It was a
yeah,
little lazy, but there is some similarities in the game, right? Manu had that slow kind of Euro step. Harden has that slow Euro step in his game. So they were there, but it's a lazy comparison for sure. I never, I was already hating on the guy early on, so I was not loving the Manu comparisons. I would argue left, right, and center with anyone who said he was Manu Ginóbili.
yeah, and I think it completely disregards the defensive playmaking that Manu brought to the table.
100%,
You know,
100%. Yeah, it's an insult
so
to Manu Ginóbili, honestly.
yeah, in a way it is, right? I mean, despite what you thought of Harden and how good offensively he ended up being. So I mean, I think if I remember correctly, I don't think I had much of an opinion on him way back then. I just thought, this is a nice player coming off the bench, and he's going to be a good scorer for this team. I didn't know what his ceiling was. I don't think I ever foresaw him being like an MVP caliber player at OKC. I just thought he would be a great, scorer off the bench who would have a long career doing that. So obviously they make the finals. That OKC big three, that homegrown big three with Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden, and he gets traded to Houston in one of the probably worst trades in NBA history, which was motivated almost exclusively by OKC ownership wanting to avoid the luxury tax. I don't think they've gotten enough abuse for that trade because they definitely deserve it. But did you think it's an interesting what if he stays in OKC, if they eat just that little bit of luxury tax? I don't remember how much it was, but I don't think it was some astronomical amount. Do you think that core eventually wins an NBA championship in that era?
I think if they keep Harden, they definitely have a shot at least one NBA Finals. I think they could have done it. Yeah, they weren't up to the task against LeBron's Miami Heat, right? But I think as they grew, Harden, you saw his game evolve offensively. The Thunder had the guys around him defensively, so he didn't have to worry about defense. They had Ibaka, in the paint. So I think they could have done it. And I think OKC ownership traded him to save $5 million. That's literally what they saved. $5 million and ruined their chances at being like contenders year in and year out at in the NBA Finals. So
Mm-hmm. And I think it shows you that they were probably closer to like your opinion of him because
maybe, yeah, I guess maybe that's what they thought. They're like, he's nowhere near
yeah,
Manu Ginóbili. Let's get rid of this guy.
exactly. So their return was, Kevin Martin, was it
Jeremy Lamb.
Jeremy Lamb, right?
Yeah.
I was going to say Anthony Lamb. Jeremy Lamb.
That would make that trade even worse.
Yeah, exactly, right. A number of picks, some bunch of other stuff, but it was definitely a cost-saving move. And what it did, I do think that they would be able to win one championship in that era. I mean, they had already proven that they could handle the Spurs. I know this was like early Kawhi days, so it was a weird time, but I do think that collection of talent eventually would have won, assuming health and all that stuff. I think they ran into some bad luck with Russell's knee and Kevin
Mm-hmm.
Durant's foot and a bunch of other stuff as well. So I think it's a great what if. I think we should maybe spend another podcast on that what if, and if they would have been able to overcome the Spurs and the Heatles and all that stuff.
And imagine if they had Harden for that Game 7 against the Dubs, right? That probably is changing our trajectory too.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, effectively what they did with that trade was create another contender.